Welcome back to the grim darkness of the 41st millennium. This is an age of strife, of bloodshed, and of war, where the only constant is change itself, where the imperium of man teeters on the edge of annihilation, beset by enemies without and within, where the galaxy is dying one planet at a time, consumed by the forces of chaos, devoured by ravenous aliens, or torn asunder by the machinations of a malevolent god. For even in this dark future, hope is never abandoned. There are heroes amongst men, champions who step up to defend all that is good in this dark and terrible time. And they fight on, though victory seems impossible, though the odds are insurmountable. Because what matters most of all is that they keep fighting. Because that is all that there is left. And so, if you find yourself lost in the vastness of space, hunted by demons through the warp, or facing down a tide of alien monsters, take heart. You are not alone. Join us now as we recount tales from across the 41st millennium and beyond, where even in the darkest hour, a single spark of courage can light the way to salvation. And so we come to the first story in our series, The God That Crawls. Inquisitor Kale stood upon the cracked and rusting hull of his landing craft, gazing out upon the monochrome landscape before him. Rust-colored sand stretched as far as he could see, beneath a sky of perpetual twilight, broken only by the twin moons of Virex 7. The air was still, the wind absent. Even the wind, it seemed, feared to tread upon this dead world. And yet somehow the silence was worse than any battle, more terrifying than any foe. For Kaylee had come to Vrex 7 with a kill team of void-born paladins to investigate a transmission. A single word sent on a whisper. It. Then silence again. To the untrained ear, it might have meant little, but to the Ordo Hereticus, silence was a language all its own, and the Inquisitors had heard its whispers across the galaxy many times before. He turned, his bolter heavy in his hand, and gestured to the smoldering remains of the cathedral that loomed against the horizon. That was why they were here. This had once been the pride of Vrex, the Cathedral of the Infinite Coil, home to a techno-religious order known as the Cogitators, who worshipped the machine beyond flesh. An abomination it was, and a dangerous one. But how had purging it brought them here? To answer his question, Brother Vorn, one of the 3 void-born paladins with him, pointed to the ground. "Here, Inquisitor," he said, kneeling beside a corroded metal plate. Etched into its surface were strange sigils, and Vorn translated their meaning with a grim shake of his head. They believed the universe was a wound, Inquisitor, and their god, the infection. They sought to spread the silence across the galaxy, starting with this world. Kale felt a cold dread coil around his heart, a premonition of things to come. But it was too late now. His mind had already made up its choice. He was going inside. The moment he crossed the threshold, the silence was broken. Whispers echoed through the chamber, coalescing into words. "Brother Varn, is that you?" Kyle turned to see Varn kneeling, his visor gone, his face ashen, his eyes wide and staring. "It's my mother," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "She died when I was a child. I haven't heard her voice in decades." But the apparition was gone as quickly as it had come. And soon enough, another voice rang out. That of Sister Eileen, the only female among the paladins. "Ellen, my child," she breathed, falling to her knees. "It's me. You don't have to be afraid anymore. Come home." Kale watched as Elena closed her eyes, and a tear traced a path down her armored cheek. "My father," she murmured. "I thought I was the last of the line." And then he felt it too, a tugging at his mind. a warmth spreading through his chest. But he shook it off, resisting the urge to give in. Whatever lay at the heart of this place, it was feeding on their emotions, wrapping their memories like barbed wire, turning their deepest feelings of love and loss into weapons against them. He strode forward, ignoring the whispers and the visions, until the path ahead vanished, dropping him into a cavernous pit. At its bottom lay a black disk, and as he descended, he heard a voice that chilled him to the bone. "It crawls," it hissed, and the very walls of the cathedral seemed to recoil in horror. "So close," it whispered, and Kyle felt a presence behind him, unseen, unheard, yet somehow inescapable. "Show me," it urged, and his muscles tensed, his gut twisting. "Now!" Then he saw it slithering toward him, rising from the pit, growing larger with every passing moment. As it neared, the whispers crescendoed into a cacophony, but they weren't voices of the dead or of loved ones. They were alien, inhuman. The walls of the cathedral writhed, contorting into obscene shapes before hardening once more. Cale raised his bolter, the cold steel reassuring in his grip. But as the thing stepped fully into view, he lowered the weapon, his expression grim. It wasn't a beast. It wasn't a machine. It was something in between, something corrupted and wrong. A mass of writhing tentacles crowned by a humanoid head, covered in putrid flesh, dripping with ichor. Its limbs ended in needle-sharp claws, its torso a patchwork of grafted metal and bone. Wires snaked down its arms, disappearing into its chest cavity. And from its mouth dripped a viscous saliva that burned through rock and metal alike. As it drew closer, Cale could make out the sigil emblazoned upon its chest, the same one that had adorned the metal plate outside. This was the machine beyond flesh, the god of the cogitators, the bringer of silence. "You crawl," it rasped, its voice a chorus of whispers, "but you cannot hide. I am the echo of worship. I am the hunger of forgotten gods." And, with a sudden squawk, it lunged. The paladins fired. Bolter shells tore through the creature, ripping chunks of flesh from its limbs, blasting metal from its torso. But the machine beyond flesh merely absorbed the faith they projected. With every shot that struck true, it grew stronger, more coherent. The creature recoiled, letting out a strangled screech, its form flickering as if in pain. "Do it!" Cale shouted over the din. "Burn it!" Varn and Ellen hesitated, fear etched upon their visors. "But, Inquisitor, it will take our souls," Varn stammered. "I know," Cale replied, his voice grim. "We all have a price to pay, brother, but this is the only way. Fire it." And so they did, opening the valves on their armor, releasing the soul flare charges stored within their packs. Blazing trails of golden energy erupted from their weapons, engulfing the cathedral and the machine beyond flesh within. And as it screamed in agony, dissolving into golden flame, Cale smiled. Weeks later, a salvage crew arrived on Virex 7, hoping to strip the ruined cathedral of its still functional components. What they found instead were the smoldering remains of a dozen space marines and a single mirror. Looking into its surface, each crewman saw themselves, their faces pale and drawn, their eyes wide with terror, and behind them, something slithering, coiling, crawling. And so the infection spread. On Kirill 9, the next cogitator cathedral awaited, a monument to silence where the faithful worshipped the absence of sound, where the masses had willingly silenced themselves in the hopes of achieving higher states of contemplation. But all it had achieved was to make them easy prey. For Inquisitor, Cale had already arrived, accompanied by a handful of paladins, and they had heard the whispers of the damned, the prayers of the infected. and they knew what they had to do. This has been The God That Crawls, a tale from the grim darkness of the 41st millennium. I hope you enjoyed this grim, dark tale of techno-heresy. If you want to hear more stories set in the Warhammer 40K universe, please stay tuned. We have plenty more where that came from. Until next time, may your bolters be ever true and your enemies drowned in the sweet embrace of the Emperor's wrath. Like, comment, and subscribe for more.